But first, breaking news in a story uncovered by the 7 Action News investigators. A Supreme Court judge accused of fraud will retire.
And that news comes right after a judicial watchdog group called for the suspension of Justice Diane Hathaway. Good evening to you. I'm Joanne Purton.
And I'm Stephen Clark. And that group says she committed, quote, blatant and brazen violations of professional conduct. We first broke the story about Hathaway's questionable real estate dealings way back in May. Ross Jones is here now. Ross, the Attorney General, today called the complaint against Hathaway unprecedented.
There is really no other word for it, Stephen. Good evening. This is not how Justice Diane Hathaway wanted her time on the bench to end. She'll be stepping down from the state's highest court as a direct result of our investigation.
She learned the values of toughness, hard work, integrity.
Integrity probably isn't a word most voters are associating with Diane Hathaway these days. Not after she was hit with complaints from the U.S. Attorney and Judicial Tenure Commission, both accusing her of fraud. So with no end in sight to her legal problems, today Hathaway's attorney announced that the justice is retiring. Effective January 21st, she'll be turning in her robe and gavel. The stunning announcement comes on the heels of a November civil complaint filed by the U.S. Attorney and an ongoing FBI probe into her short sale exposed by 7 Action News last May. As we reported, Hathaway moved a $750,000 Florida home out of her name while she was pleading poverty to her bank, putting it in a stepdaughter's name. Once the bank approved her short sale, it moved back into the justice's name. Today, Wayne State law professor Peter Henning said the pressure on Hathaway and her attorney was mounting.
The prospect of a Judicial Tenure Commission inquiry with its standard, which is even any appearance of impropriety could be enough for a sanction, that I think that and the ongoing federal forfeiture action was enough to want to push her out of office.
Now, Hathaway still has 14 days left on the bench, but she has agreed not to take part in any matters before the court. In the meantime, she still has to worry about resolving her civil case with the feds and possible criminal charges down the road.
And speaking of, you have that the JTC complaint also. Whatever happens to that?
Well, this effectively neutralizes it because when she steps down in 2 weeks, she's no longer a judge. They only have jurisdiction over judges. There's nothing they can do.
And retirement is different than getting kicked off the bench?
Resigning, she would still get a pension, you would expect.
All right, Ross Jones, thank you very much.
Our 7 legal analyst Tom Cranmer is here now to give us his take on these developments today. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
All right, let's talk about all this. First of all, her decision to retire today. What do you make of this?
Joanne, I think in some respects it's not surprising because of the pressure that mounted in part from the Channel 7 investigation and certainly in part from the civil action that was filed by the U.S. Attorney's Office as a result of the short sale. So this seems to be something that was inevitable.
You heard Ross just say there that it kind of neutralizes the JTC Commission complaint filed today. We got word of it just minutes before we learned from her attorney that she was going to retire as well. But what about the FBI probe and the U.S. Attorney and looking into her? Where do you think this news today, what kind of bearing, if any, does it have on those possible charges and those complaints?
Joanne, I think with regard to that, those are still very much alive. Again, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal prosecutors filed a civil action as a result of the short sale. But what we haven't seen yet is whether or not they're going to bring criminal charges, and I think that's still a very real possibility. What happened today is the Judicial Tenure Commission, the watchdog agency for judges and justices, filed this complaint. It was very detailed. It had allegations of violations of federal law in it, federal criminal statutes. But I think the fact that Justice Hathaway is stepping down will, as Ross said, neutralize that and probably cause that proceeding not to go forward. But the federal prosecution, I think, is very much a possibility.
Yeah, we'll stay on top of it, and I know you will as well. Tom Cranmer, thank you very much.